Welcome to C-Vine News. You're listening to The Truth with your host, Linda Forsythe.
What is going on at Gitmo in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, the military prison that is there? There's more news that came out yesterday about another round of KSM et al. 9/11 trial postponements. You are listening to KTIE Radio AM 590. This is Linda Forsythe, and it's interesting on what is going on that a lot of people just aren't paying attention to. And this is what C-Vine is going to go out of their way to try and build a little bit more awareness. In January 2019, C-Vine was given permission by the DoD, Department of Defense, the Office of Military Commissions, to be able to attend and watch some of the tribunals going on in Gitmo, but it was done through a satellite viewing room that is stationed on Fort Meade in Maryland. And this special room is actually, you can watch the tribunals live via CCTV that has a 40-second delay, which is exactly what the people who are on Gitmo in the actual tribunals watching it, that's exactly what they see also. 40-second delay to make certain that there isn't any secure information that is put out there. Now, yesterday, it was put out that the information for the tribunals for the month of January, and this is January 2022, was going to have another round of KSM et al. Tribunals on starting January 10th. Now, those of you that are new to this, KSM et al. Stands for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the others. There are 5 terrorists that are being tried together, and KSM, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, is the alleged mastermind. Okay, so if all of January was just postponed, what is going on? We just got through going through over a year and a half of postponements of all the trials that was going on in Guantanamo Bay since March of 2020, and just opened up a couple of months ago to be able to start the tribunals again. Well, what we're going to talk about today is some of the things that has transpired that you may not be aware of. First off, these trials are still in pre-trial. 9/11, September 1st, 2001, 9/11 terror attacks happened over 20 years ago. And all of these trials that are going on right now having to do with 9/11 are still in the pre-trial phase. Pre-trial phase. These haven't even begun to go to tribunal yet. Many people don't know that. Well, what's really interesting is why this is the case. Now, I'm not going to go over the 20 years in this particular video, this particular show, about what has been going on for 20 years. What I am going to talk about is what happened on the last tribunal before Guantanamo Bay shut down because of the pandemic in March. And the last tribunal, or I should say pre-trial, that happened before the shutdown happened in January of 2020. January of 2020. Now, why this is so incredibly important is because during that particular trial, the government, so to speak, the CIA, FBI, was being questioned by the defense team. And to make a very long story short, there were a number of things that came out during these pre-trials that caused Judge Cohen, his very last sentence during that very last trial in January 2020, said, and this is not verbatim, but the gist of it was, if he finds out that the government, the CIA, prosecution has been doing some shenanigans, so to speak, with a number of the things that were brought up in the trial. He was going to be kicking the case out of court. He's going to dismiss the case out of court. Well, in that type of situation, as his very last sentence, about 2 weeks later, Judge Shane Cohen, 2 weeks later, made an announcement that he was quitting and that he would not be continuing on to be the judge for KSM et al. And he basically stated that he was concerned for the welfare of his family. Cryptic statement, that's pretty much what was said. Well, what happened briefly in January of 2020, that tribunal, there were 3 things that were discussed. And one of them was that there in 2001, in April from 2001 to October 2001, there was a linguist listening in on all the chatter that was going on when they were hearing about 9/11 being planned. So close to 6 months of listening in to chatter and listening to all the various different plans, they knew that 9/11 was coming, was documented. And this linguist also was one of the people there during the enhanced interrogation, another word for torture, at one of the black sites, because this individual could tell just by listening to the verbiage of the discussion that she was during the 6 months of whose voices were whose. And so this person was in attendance during the enhanced interrogation. Well, since this was so long ago, she eventually retired. And what was interesting was in 2013, the beginning of the second round of pretrials, because the first round of pretrials was thrown out of court at that time because Obama decided that any information that was found through enhanced interrogation was inadmissible in court. So in the beginning of the second round of pretrials, starting all over again from scratch, they had what was called clean teams. And these clean teams basically got the information. It was the rules that they, I guess I don't know how else to put it, they had to be nice to the terrorists. Nothing could be forced out of them, no torture or anything to this effect. I mean, they even got them McDonald's Happy Meals from the commissary and everything else. But anyway, I digress. On one of the closed proceedings during the second round of pretrials in 2013, the five individuals being tried together, 4 of the 5 terrorists that were sitting in the courtroom in a closed proceeding recognized the linguist who was in the enhanced interrogation when they went through that in the black site, was sitting on the prosecution side, prosecution team, and was basically had gotten a job on that team. This was after she retired. This, of course, was the individual originally that had heard them during the chatter in 2001 for 6 months. So talking about a major conflict of interest, that is one of the things that they were discussing. The other was because it was found out in multiple situations that the government, the CIA, the FBI, had been listening in to privileged conversations, attorney-client conversations, and taping it on a number of different situations, plus conversations the prisoners would have in Gitmo themselves. They couldn't talk face-to-face, but they could hear each other's voices, and all that was also taped. So there were a number of things that came out in January of 2020 that which is the reason why Judge Cohen was ready to dismiss the case out of court. Well, the reason this is important is because, as I mentioned, a couple of weeks after that last tribunal pretrial that was going on, after Judge Cohen quit, then 2 weeks after that, which was March of 2020, Gitmo was shut down, basically to the bare minimum for essential personnel only because of the pandemic. And so did the rest of the world. All happened starting in March of 2020. And every 3 months after that, since then, all of the trials that were scheduled for the entire year, just every 3 months, they would postpone them off the books. So it finally got to the point of where it was in November of 2021 that they started up again. And they have had 3 rounds since then. In the first round, they basically were going over the voir dire because they were still trying to find a judge to replace Judge Cohen, who had quit quite some time before that. But it wasn't just because they were starting up again. It was because the other judges that they were going to be bringing on, none of them passed muster, so to speak. None of them were accepted in the voir dire. So that was, for the most part, what the majority of the first tribunal, after it started again, after a year and a half, that's what they discussed. And then in the middle of the second one, it was basically all housekeeping. A big nothing burger. Well, what is important about this is there are a couple of things that have not been addressed. Most people either aren't aware of it, and so they don't even know to look for it, or it's just fallen through the cracks, but I'm going to make certain it doesn't. Now, first off, what is interesting is Judge Cohen, the one that quit, in June of 2019, was the first judge at that time for 18 years that set a tribunal date to go to tribunal. And that date was January 11th, 2021. January 11th, 2021. The date was set in June of 2019. That gave over a year and a half of everybody to get their ducks in a row, so to speak. And then they were going to finally go to tribunal. Well, of course, we know that didn't happen because everything was shut down in March of 2020. And when January 11th, 2021 came along, everything was still shut down. So wouldn't it be of reasonable importance to set a new tribunal date? Well, that hasn't even been brought up. They're still doing what they have been, the proverbial housekeeping, and quite a few of the attorneys, the new legal team that's come in, whatever, has to familiarize themselves with a very complicated, many years of information of going on with the trial. We're going to stop in just a few minutes to hear a word from our sponsor. This is Linda Forsythe from CVine News on AM 590 KTIE.
What is CVine anyway? The acronym CVine stands for Community Voices, Investigations, News, and Education. CVine is a grassroots collection of people from all walks of life, skills, and talents, banding together to heal our community. As a group of law enforcement, retired military, accountants, teachers, doctors, nurses, clergy, stay-at-home moms, or the local construction worker, CVine donates their time where needed. It is we the people who built America from generations of blood, sweat, and tears. CVine creates teams to tackle work where it is needed. All volunteers have their own businesses or personal lives, but donate their time in an area they have experience and skills. The news portion of C-Vine investigates existing news stories by licensed investigators. C-Vine journalists report the news live on social media. C-Vine also has commentary and analysis recorded on AM radio. Watch for news teams now being formed in the education sector called Project Mayberry, coming very soon. Visit the cvine.com website, become a member, and sign up for C-Vine's newsletter. That's c-vine.com, c-vine.com.
AM 590, The Answer.
Welcome back to AM 590 KTIE. This is Linda Forsythe. And as we continue on with our discussion about what is going on with Gitmo. Now, as I go on to discuss exactly what are the things that were not brought up on the Gitmo trials that were coming back again in the last couple of months, I want to make a clarification. I am not in any way disparaging any of the workers, the legal team, or any of the others over all these years that have been working very, very hard at what they're doing. They're following the laws as they stand right now. What they are doing, it is not their fault, and why it is taking so long. I just wanted to make this very, very clear. Many have been working very, very hard and doing actually a lot of good work with the information they have. This is bringing the situation in general to light for the public to be aware that there is something that is not right. Okay, I will continue on. So, what I brought up before the station break is no new tribunal dates have been set. Hasn't even been brought up, has not been discussed. The second thing that has not been brought up at all is there was absolutely no discussion whatsoever on why Judge Cohen was going to dismiss the case. In the very last tribunal before the shutdown in January of 2020, some very serious stuff came out in court, in open tribunal, pretrial. So wouldn't this be a priority to bring out in some way, shape, or form? At least address it. Absolutely nothing was brought up. And the third thing that is not being brought up is in 2012, there was a federal court case that the victims and family members of 9/11 had brought out in a lawsuit to sue for a name that was brought out in federal court. That was the name of an elected Saudi official that is the true orchestrator of 9/11. That is huge. And it has been redacted and held in top secret information. And the attorney for the victims and family members has been trying all these years to get that name released. In fact, on January 12th, 2019, which is, September 12th, 2019, then Attorney General Barr was given a deadline that he had to make a decision in order to clear all the redacted names and information that it was being suppressed, withheld back from that trial that named that Saudi official. And I don't know how many of you remember this, but Attorney General Barr basically came on and said that he was going to release those names, but it was going to be under seal. And the name was going to be released to Saudi officials, the attorney, the legal team for the Saudi officials in Saudi was also going to be released to the attorneys for the victims and family members, and was also going to be released to the defense team for KSM et al. but under seal. So in other words, handing him an envelope, here's the name, you can't open it, you can't use it, but I've released it to you. Well, obviously, that the fact that this is even a thing at all, and it's not even being brought up or discussed by mainstream media, except there were a couple of mainstream media reports giving a small person on the totem pole, so to speak, name out of San Diego that was supposed to have been one of the other possible terrorists flying a plane that changed his mind at the last minute. And they basically, mainstream media was saying that the name was leaked. Well, that's not even a fraction of what happened. Now, the attorney for the victims and family members put together a 2-hour video that I am going to be going over in pieces in a documentary, putting videos together with commentary from some of the things that we also have seen. And I have verified it with Ron Fleisvig, the spokesman for the Office of Military Commissions. If there is anything that this attorney has said that is misspoken, is not true, is inaccurate, or whichever, and he basically said it was spot on. Well, this 2-hour video that this attorney put together, for the most part, lays out exactly, without naming names, who the orchestrators are and what is happening by piecemealing a multitude of bits of information that has happened over the years and puts together a very nice bit of information that clears everything up for good. But yet, even though this video is out there, it is a matter of public access. Anyone can listen to it. Because it is done in a very, it's not entertaining. It is a very methodically done way. It really hasn't been receiving the hits on YouTube with people watching it because it's being drowned out by all other types of information that's being put out there. Kind of like, look over there, not over here. Nobody is bringing up why this name isn't being released. Well, we can speculate. And when I talk about this in some of the other future videos, you're going to see what's happening and why, and how something, somehow, some way, and it comes by a lot of names, whether it is by the proverbial deep state, whatever. Something, somewhere, somehow, some way is keeping things from moving forward. The people in Gitmo that are the legal team and everything are following the laws, but certain laws are being put in place in such a way, like the authorized use of military force, the AUMF prisoners, what they have nicknames of forever prisoners, and all these various different things on how the laws are set up, that there is no end in sight. It just keeps circling back over and over and over again. And I use that name on purpose, circling back. Okay, so why wasn't that discussed? That's kind of important for a pretrial, don't you think? Well, after this word from our sponsor, we're going to come back and we are going to talk about the next subject. Be sure to listen in a little bit later, the videos that I do that gives pretty much an outline of what is going on in Gitmo. You do not want to miss that. This is Linda Forsythe on AM 590 KTIE.
Hey folks, just a quick reminder that back in 2008 and 9, a lot of people lost all of their retirement savings and their 401ks and IRAs because they did not own gold and silver. Yeah, that's right. Gold and silver protects you from a market crash. So do yourself a favor, protect your retirement by purchasing gold and silver. You can go to moneymetals.com, reach out to them, and they will help you set yourself up to protect you and your family from having to start all over from scratch. If you're a first-time buyer and you spend more than $100, use promo code PIMPY, P-I-M-P-Y, and they will send along with your order a free half ounce of silver. So folks, do yourself a favor, head on over to moneymetals.com and protect you and your family from a market crash as well as inflation.
AM 590, The Answer.
Okay, so as we move forward in going ahead and discussing what it is that I'm going to bring to your attention, I'm taking you to the c-find.com website, our c-find.com website. And one of the main releases that just came out has to do with this. Over 200 released Gitmo detainees are back to killing Americans. All right, so what does that mean? Demonstrators in this picture, you can see, are wearing orange jumpsuits and hoods over their heads, rallied to demand closure of the detention camp at the U.S. Naval Station in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And these are demonstrators outside the White House that was going on January 11th, 2019. Now, they've been rallying to go ahead and release these AUMF prisoners for a very long time. In fact, as recently as July 19th, 2021, Julia Connolly reported the following about Gitmo. 39 men still remain. After prisoners' release, Biden urged to close Gitmo completely, bringing an end to 2 decades of unjust and abusive military detention of Muslim men at Guantanamo is a human rights obligation and a national security necessity, said the ACLU. And you can read the further part of the report right here. I have the link there. This again is on c-find.com as it stands right now. Over 800 Gitmo prisoners were released under the Obama administration, who worked very hard to close Guantanamo Bay but did not succeed. Former President Trump mandated Gitmo was to stay open while he was in office. And also, he opened up the pretrials. Again, none of these are in tribunals yet. After 20 years, they're all pretrials. He opened up the pretrials to the public in 2019, which is how Seavine, citizen journalists, and et cetera were there. We actually went to Fort Meade in Maryland and watched the Guantanamo Bay trials, the Gitmo trials via CCTV. There in a special viewing room on Fort Meade, and it's exactly like being in Gitmo. That is actually open to the public should you want to do that, going to Fort Meade. And I believe there are some others on the East Coast that if you wanted to watch the trials, you could do it. You could even report on if you so choose. Okay. So when you continue reading and knowing what was going on and why they have been trying to close Guantanamo Bay for a very long time, here's a report that just came out from the New York Post. Biden reversed Trump's order to keep Guantanamo Bay open after assuming office. 20 years after the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. intelligence documents revealed 229 rehabbed former Gitmo detainees have returned to terrorism and killing Americans, and an alarming 66% of them have not been recaptured and are still at large. Meanwhile, President Biden is quietly freeing more of these terrorist suspects from the Guantanamo Bay prison, all to fulfill his old boss's pledge to permanently close the facility in Cuba. Shortly after taking office, Biden reversed President Trump's executive order to keep Gitmo open and is lining up inmates to transfer out of the prison with the goal of emptying it and shuttering it, even though the remaining prisoners have long been classified by military intelligence as the worst of the worst and too dangerous to release. Last month, the president freed his first prisoner, accused terrorist Abdul Latif Nasir, leaving the number of remaining detainees at 39. 10 others have been cleared for release, including some of Osama bin Laden's bodyguards and 9/11 mastermind Khalik Sheikh Mohammed's safe house operator, according to Gitmo parole board documents. Still other detainees have appeared to the Biden administration through their pro bono defense lawyers to ensure their release despite the risk of them returning to militant activities. The suspected 20th hijacker, Mohammed al-Qutani, and a dozen other inmates are slated for parole hearings this year, documents reveal. Biden is clearing out the cells despite being fully briefed by his intelligence agencies that 1 in 3 released detainees have gone back to fighting against America, and some have actually managed to kill more Americans. Based on trends identified during the past 17 years, we assess that some detainees currently at Gitmo will seek to re-engage in terrorist or insurgent activities after they are transferred, a recent U.S. intelligence report warned. According to the December 2020 classified report by the Office of National Intelligence, a total of 229 of the 729 detainees released from Gitmo have re-engaged in terrorist activities, including conducting and planning attacks and recruiting funding terrorists. That's a rate of 31%. The share would be even higher if U.S. intelligence included engagement of anti-U.S. statements or propaganda in its definition of terrorist activities. Some of the repeat offenders have since died or been recaptured, but 151 or 66% of them are still at large, the document reveals, and some American blood on their hands. At least 12 released detainees have launched attacks on U.S. forces in Afghanistan and killed about half a dozen American soldiers and civilians. The exact figure remains classified. In fact, most of the former detainees found re-engaging in terrorist activities are Afghans, which raises security alarms given the Taliban's sacking of the U.S.-backed government in Kabul and the flood of largely unvetted Afghan refugees being resettled in U.S. cities. More than 200 Afghan prisoners have been repatriated from Gitmo. One notorious Gitmo recidivist, Abdullah Guam Rasul, became the Taliban's operations commander in southern Afghanistan soon after his 2007 release from the prison. He was blamed for masterminding a surge in roadside attacks against American troops and organizing assaults on U.S. aircraft in Afghanistan. The Taliban has relied on former detainees to fill other key leadership roles as well, including the Taliban 5, who were released by President Obama in 2014 over Pentagon objections and are now top dogs in the revamped enemy group. As the Post first reported Monday, at least one of the freed Taliban commanders engaged in talks with Biden diplomats to secure the precipitous withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. In addition, Mullah Zakir was sent from Gitmo to Afghanistan in 2007, where he became one of the Taliban's top military chiefs. Taliban fighters in this picture patrol of the Wazir Akbar Khan neighborhood in the city of Kabul, Afghanistan, Wednesday, August 18th, 2021. So that's just a couple days ago, folks. Counterterrorism experts warned that now that the Taliban has seized control of Afghanistan in the wake of Biden's widely criticized pullout of U.S. forces, more Gitmo alumni could take up with the Taliban and other terrorist groups in the country. One of the Taliban honchos who last Sunday captured the presidential palace in Kabul with armed fighters boasted in a victory speech that he spent several years at Gitmo. The former detainee Gholam Rouhani was captured by U.S. forces after 9/11 and incarcerated in the detention center in Cuba. He was transferred back to Afghanistan 6 years later, pleading he needed to return home to help his sick father run their family shop. Such pitiful stories are common in detainees pleading before the Gitmo's parole board, which has tended to sympathize with the tales, especially during the Obama administration. At least 5 different inmates released during the Obama years told the same sob story to the review board about wishing to see their ailing mother before she passed away. Their attorneys have successfully argued that the formerly violent clients have been rehabilitated through baking and yoga classes.
Both Biden and Obama have justified paroling these America-hating jihadists by preconditioning their release on assurances from the Muslim countries taking custody of them that they will continue to rehab them, but reform efforts often fall short. While enforcement of transfer conditions probably has deterred many former detainees from re-engagement, the three-page ONI intelligence report states some detainees determined to re-engage have and will do so regardless of any transfer conditions. The report added, former Gitmo detainees routinely communicate with each other, families from other former detainees, and members of terrorist organizations. Republicans and counterterrorism experts say the high Gitmo recidivism rate is further evidence that Biden's plans for closing the prison are dangerously misguided. Clearing out the prison would require resettling many of the terrorist suspects overseas in countries that have a poor track record of rehabilitating them and controlling them to ensure they don't return to violent jihad. And many have the remaining prisoners from Yemen, which is too unstable to take custody of them. So these dangerous detainees would have to be moved to U.S. prisons, which don't have the same level of security as Gitmo. Then there are 14 high-value detainees, such as the suspected 9/11 architect Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who are held at Camp 7, a classified facility at Gitmo. He and 4 other men are on trial for organizing the 9/11 attacks. If they are transferred here from the military prison, they have to be tried in U.S. criminal courts and afforded all the accompanying rights given the U.S. citizens, and potentially turning their trials into circuses. And then it has click here to read more from the U.S. Post. Oh, so what does this mean? Well, I think it's kind of self-evident. They have been planning for a long time to try and close Gitmo while they've been kicking the can down the road with all the trials that are actually going on, or I should say pre-trials, which haven't gone to trial yet. And while they're trying to get rid of the AUMF prisoners that have been going back, and I think we've seen what's been going on in Afghanistan, and their big thing is it's under quote unquote Taliban control. Well, now we can add, I am sure, quite a few Al-Qaeda are there, and I'm sure ISIS and other really fun things are just all coming together, all because of Biden and whatever puppet is basically pulling those strings. We can probably guess on quite a few of that. But with that being said, I am not going to go through all this gloom and doom. For the most part, we've known it. For those of you that haven't known it, well, wake up. It's happening. It's been happening. And it's not going to get better. We now have a really big mess. But what good news is there? Well, let's discuss that. And you tell me what you think. This is the website that I have mentioned to you many times, but for you newbies, there is a website for the Office of Military Commissions, which is what handles all of everything having to do with Gitmo. And on this website, I will leave this address in the description bar. Please visit there. It has everything you need, calendar, any type of transcriptions from previous pre-trials, active cases, inactive cases, names of who they are, history, bio, any news releases, anything and everything you could ever want. Well, for the point right now, we are going to go to September 2021. This is a calendar for September, which is just going to be happening in a couple of weeks. Now, you can see here that on the 6th, September 6th is where Khalid Sheikh Mohammed et al. Is starting with a motions hearing, and it lasts for 2 weeks, ending on the 17th. Now, what is interesting, and I'm going to just prove it to you here, if you go back through, hopefully this will go quickly. Now, this is July. You can see how they emptied, except for an arraignment hearing for one of the prisoners. This is the only thing that was going on in July. And then you go back to June 2021, May, all of these that were scheduled were continued. In other words, postponed, can kick down the road. Going to April, it says here canceled, 2 of them that were scheduled. There were much more scheduled, but these were ones that were added to it, were still canceled. going back to February. This is March, this is all of them that were going to be going on in March. It looked really good that things were going to be going forward. Remember in March 2020, a year before, is when they closed Guantanamo Bay, basically, except for the bare minimum of people to keep it going. If I continue to keep going back to February, January, December, you can see all these that say canceled. This is November, canceled. This is October, all of these, the entire month, canceled, 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 canceled. This is June of 2020, all of it was canceled, and so on, all the way until March, okay? This was all that there was. They did have some of the Hadi trials going on, but the last trial that happened, period, was on March 14th, and then everything was closed down in Gitmo. Okay, so when we go back, so I can go forward now quickly. When we go back, you see on September 6th is when it's going to start, and you saw that it was going to be lasting for 2 weeks. Here's something of interest. Now, it's 20 years, as I mentioned, since 9/11, right? All right, well, this is going through September 11th, so the anniversary is happening then. What else is interesting is I noticed this and brought this up to Ron Fleisvig there in Guantanamo Bay about the September 6th is Labor Day. It's a holiday, and they're usually very, very careful of making certain that when they schedule things that this isn't done on a holiday. So I was thinking, well, maybe it was an oversight, but he said that was highly unusual. So maybe it will be starting on the 6th, but he said he wouldn't be surprised if the judge ruled that they would go ahead and maybe start on the 7th. But then I found out something yesterday, and this is what is interesting. Now, before yesterday, I have been reporting chances are probably pretty darn high that they're going to kick the can down the road again this September 2021, just like they have been doing since March of 2020. Well, what I found out yesterday, this is what I want to bring up to you, and this is something that you made to make the decision on if you think it is anything whatsoever, or if it's just a big nothing burger. So September 6th, also, not only being Labor Day, is a Jewish holiday. Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, is one of Judaism's holiest days. Rosh Hashanah commemorates the creation of the world and marks the beginning of the days of awe, a 10-day period of introspection and repentance that culminates in Yom Kippur holiday, also known as the Day of Atonement. And many prayers are also offered up for the dead. Well, you can count forward 10 days from the 6th, and you can see where it is going to end, which is for the most part on the 15th, which is when Yom Kippur starts and ends on the 16th. Okay, so the Day of Atonement. And then what is the last day? See that last day? What number is that? 17? So that's 3-4 coincidences, coinkydinks. Just bringing it out there. It may mean absolutely nothing, but I don't know. You make the decision. It's totally a wait and see, but you've got them accidentally starting the tribunals after a year and a half on a holiday, which is highly unusual for them to ever even schedule it mistakenly. Plus the fact it's the beginning of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, which also commemorates the creation of the world and marks the beginning of the days of awe, a 10-day period of introspection and repentance, and culminates with Yom Kippur, which will be on the 15th and the 16th. It's also known as the Day of Atonement. And the very next day is number 17. So that all being said, out of all the days of the year, out of all the tribunals that are happening, because there are multiple others. In fact, when you scroll down, you can see that after those 2 weeks, they're doing the tribunals for the Muhammad Abdul Nashiri trials. And so, they could have started that on the first couple of weeks. but they chose the 9/11, going through September 11th. Now, one other thing of importance that I'm going to be bringing up to you is what also was of interest was when I was in Fort Meade watching the Gitmo tribunals in September of 2020. Was that? Yes, no, 2019, excuse me. In 2019, I was there during the trials during the September 11th. And at that time, a number of the victims and family members of 9/11 had been for many, many months, in fact, years, been trying to get information that was accidentally leaked about a hidden person from Saudi being something that they haven't been bringing up that was very much they felt had a lot to do with 9/11 that wasn't even in Gitmo. And they took all of these things to federal court for years and could never get anything released. Till finally, on that September in 2019, it went in front of Barr. It went in front of Barr, Attorney General Barr, who was going to be making the decision to go ahead and release that name. Well, it actually happened the day before September 11th. September 10th was his deadline. I did a video about this, and Guantanamo Bay had actually shut down a number of the open proceedings that were supposed to happen after that in anticipation to what Barr was going to release. It was actually kind of exciting. I thought, finally, they're going to move forward with some things. I mean, all the family members and the victims and et cetera had been working on this extremely hard. And I don't know how much you guys remember, but Barr did say that he would go ahead and release the name to the attorneys for the defense in Guantanamo Bay. So they were aware of that. And they were going to release it to some officials in Saudi. And they were going to release it to the family members, but in a sealed document that could not be opened until further notice. In other words, they were giving it to the attorneys of the family members. There was a release of a name. I believe it was released by the New York Times how many months later, supposedly a leak. And the name was he was a nobody. It was a nothing burger. There's a whole lot more behind this, and I'm going to get into that in future reports. In fact, tomorrow, I'm going to go over some things that many of you, because of all the chaos and the drama that has been going on, you probably have forgotten. And this is where the really good news comes in. This is a reminder of some things that went down, that happened in the past, that I've actually done videos on. When I do the video again tomorrow, when I do the recording, I'm going to take bits and pieces of these previous videos to remind you that it is okay, that there is hope coming. I have been saying from the beginning, 9/11 trials. 9/11 is the keystone. And all of these come together with all these things that are happening around the world. And once that breaks open, the dominoes are going to fall. Now, you've been hearing that and everyone's sick of it. And so am I, quite frankly. There's been so many times I've been right there. But as you can all tell, everything around the world is culminating together. And what's going on in Afghanistan, the fact that you've got Al Qaeda there now, along with Taliban, and what's going to be happening, they'll probably be joining forces with ISIS again or re-upping that, and all these other horror stories going on. There's a lot of other things happening too that is good. And one of them, we're going to have to wait and see if they kick this can down the road again. This another September, just suspending it for whatever reason. I don't know what to say, but unless we, the people, start speaking up and saying enough already, especially with finding out that all these prior released prisoners what has been happening and how they've been harming our guys and gals over there fighting for us after they've been released and captured. All this incompetence or purposeful, I'm not even going to say the word because YouTube, I don't know what they're going to do. We need to stand up and make our voices heard. Continue staying quiet. It's not getting any better. So I'm going to go ahead and do this report tomorrow. I ask that you please go to c-find.com, and watch the news stories that we post every day. We're all volunteers. We are a charitable trust. If you would like to become a member and receive one of our newsletters that we send out, personal letter from me and some of the other volunteers to keep on top of things, probably be a good thing to do, especially if social media goes down. At least we'll have your email address. We could keep in touch with you.
Well, that's all for today. Be sure to check back to c-find.com for the documentary we are putting together about Gitmo. There is much, much more that the public needs to be aware of. Good day, everybody.